From time to time, people ask me to tell them about the path I took to end up as an engineering director at Google. The truth is, the path I followed was not a remotely traditional one, and for that reason, telling you about it might not be that useful. But in this video, I'm going to tell a quick version of my life story with an emphasis on engineering and leadership and how I ended up where I am today. And at the end, I'll share some of the key lessons I've picked up along the way. So, I was very into computers from a young age. I learned BASIC on a BBC Micro aged around 9 in the early 80s, at a time when my school had just one computer, which was wheeled around from classroom to classroom. And I got my first computer not long after that, a Commodore 16. I loved it, and I spent every second I could on it, playing games, but also programming. There weren't any online guides to programming. There was basically no internet at all, and so I just had to teach myself, mostly by playing around with things, and also by typing programs in from books and magazines. After the Commodore 16, I got a Commodore Plus 4 and then a ZX Spectrum, and then I inherited a PC, the Amstrad PC1512, with a vast, unfillable 20 megabyte hard drive. And on that computer, I got into programming in Pascal. After that, I built my own PC, a 486SX with a whopping 4 megabytes of RAM. Not long after that, I went to university and studied computer science, where I had the chance to program in C, C++, Modular 3, Prolog, Lisp, ML, and a few other languages besides. In the summer holidays before my final year at university, I got a job working for a two-person CAD software company where I was a software engineer writing code in C++ and Fortran, and I loved it. So, no surprise, when I graduated, I looked for programming jobs. I got a job at what seemed like an amazingly cool startup in Cambridge in the UK. It was called Autonomy. And there I learned Java and JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and Visual Basic. I stayed there for 3 years, which was probably longer than I should have stayed, but I did learn a lot from the experience. I was given the task really early on to work with another engineer on converting their Windows-based intelligent agent software into a multi-threaded knowledge management server. And almost from the beginning, I was sent alone to customer sites. I was also given an informal leadership role, growing and leading a small team of engineers in the company's nascent US office. But perhaps more importantly, I learned a lot about leadership. Or to be slightly more precise, I had a lot of opportunity to observe really quite bad leadership. And as a result of that, I felt energized to start my own company with the goal of proving to myself, if not to the world, that it was possible to have a successful business that treated its employees, customers, suppliers, and partners with respect and dignity. So I went from being a software engineer with some informal leadership responsibility to being CEO of an AI startup at a time when there were no AI startups, literally overnight. And then over the next 7 or 8 years, I got involved in pretty much every aspect of the company: fundraising, sales and marketing, partner management, service delivery, operations, and product management. And by the time we sold the company and I moved on, I didn't really know who I was anymore. The main role I'd been doing in my final year was as something like head of product management, but I hadn't had any formal or informal, for that matter, training, and I was pretty much making it up as I went along. Oh, and during the time of running that company, I wrote a textbook on artificial intelligence, which got published in the US and also in Brazil. So in one way or another, I've been working with AI for basically my entire career. After we grew that company to about 50 people, and then we downsized it to about 10 people, which was just a horrible experience for everyone involved. And then we grew it again to about 35 people. And then we sold the company, and I went back to university and did a master's degree in linguistics. And that wasn't to advance my career, but more as a kind of sabbatical, just to have a break and indulge in a subject that I really loved. I did some programming and also some consulting work at the same time, but I mostly focused on my studies. And once I completed the master's, I dabbled in a bit more consulting, and I started a short-lived company that was going to revolutionize the way people watch TV, which seemed like a really cool idea in 2008. At that time, I applied for a job as a product manager at Google, but I ended up not getting the role, so I joined a friend's startup in Cambridge, where I stayed for a few years. There I managed a small team of engineers and research scientists focused on using AI to help improve energy efficiency in people's homes. And I also took on some product management responsibilities. Throughout my life, I've always been programming for fun at home. In the last 15 years or so, I've built various websites, most of which are still out there if you know where to look. I built all of those websites in PHP. Please don't hate me. I love PHP. It's fun to program in. In 2012, I took the plunge and joined another friend's startup in London, DeepMind, taking on a role leading a team of engineers and research scientists focused on applied machine learning. You may notice a pattern there. DeepMind was in total stealth mode at that time, and so for 2 years, no one heard about us at all, and people would sometimes show up for job interviews worried that the whole thing might turn out to be some kind of scam, that we might be about to steal their kidneys, because we didn't even have a public website and there was literally no information about us in the public domain at all. 2 years later, in 2014, DeepMind was acquired by Google, and so having been rejected by Google for a product management role in 2008, I ended up sneaking in the back door to Google as a software engineering manager in 2014. 4 years and 2 promotions later, in 2018, I was a director. I'd grown an applied machine learning team from 0 up to over 100 people in London and California, and then I took a break for health reasons before coming back into a completely different role with no reports at all. Now I have a much smaller team focused on using artificial intelligence for societally beneficial purposes, and I just manage a small team of engineers. I love it. So there it is. I said at the beginning that I didn't know if this would be particularly helpful, and you can probably see what I mean, but I want to take this opportunity to share a few key things I've learned from this journey I've been on. First of all, relationships are the most important thing. What you do is never as important as how what you do affects other people. I want to share a little story that relates to a part of this. I was working in one of these startups and I was standing at the front desk chatting to the office manager. While we were talking, a sales guy came over and asked if she had any food. He'd missed lunch and he was starving. These were the days before startups provided an amazing selection of free food. The office manager shook her head and said, "No, sorry, I haven't got any food." So the sales guy wandered off. And then a few minutes later, he came back. He said, "Surely you at least have some biscuits." "Nope," she said, "sorry, nothing." So he shrugged sadly and wandered off. Once he was out of sight, the office manager turned to the cupboard behind her, opened it up, pulled out a tin of biscuits and offered me one. I laughed and accepted, but I was kind of shocked. "Why didn't you give him a biscuit?" I asked. "He's always really rude to me," she said. "He either completely ignores me when he walks past the desk or he shouts at me and is upset with me about something. What you just saw, that was the first time he's ever been polite to me in the months that he's been working here. He doesn't deserve a biscuit," she said. Now, I'm not telling this story to suggest that you should be kind to people in order to get free food or other things, but I do think it's a useful reminder that we're all in it together. Everyone you work with deserves your respect and kindness as much as everyone else. And if you see a colleague as being somehow beneath you and you treat them badly as a result, then you'll likely find that it comes back around and bites you on the butt. So lesson 1, every relationship matters. Lesson 2, don't try to skip steps. I'm not sure if I'm really the best placed person to say this, given that I basically skipped straight from being an engineer to being a CEO. But the reality is that although I've been very lucky in my career, making that jump has often made it harder for me to figure out what I am, how I fit into organizations, and what role I should take on. And I also think when you skip steps like that, you miss out on important learnings. In my case, it's something actually fairly obvious. I've never been a senior software architect or any other kind of really senior engineer. So there's a big gap in my capabilities and knowledge. It'll be different for everyone, but especially early on in your career, I definitely think it's a good idea to not focus too much on climbing the ladder super fast. Rather focus on growing and learning. It'll pay dividends in the long run, I promise. Lesson 3, if you are going down the leadership path, you will at some point have to stop doing technical things like writing code. It's almost inevitable. For me, it happened very quickly because I was setting up and running a company, so I just didn't have time anymore to write code. And like I said, this probably happened too quickly in my case, and it led to gaps in my knowledge. But regardless, if you do go down this path, it's very hard to maintain a balance of leadership work and individual contributor work like writing code. It's not impossible, and there are people that do it, but it is very rare. And unfortunately, it's even rarer that these people are actually good at both sides of what they do. Lesson 4, I briefly mentioned earlier that I ended up taking a break for health reasons. Now, this was due to a bunch of factors, but the fact that I wasn't managing my own stress at work was definitely a contributor. I was working long days in London and traveling frequently to California, and I wasn't paying any attention at all to my own well-being. My body was in various ways telling me that it was too much, but I was ignoring it. So that's the final lesson. Listen to your body. I'm not going to claim that it's always easy to know what your body is telling you or to know what to do about it, but I'm pretty sure it's better if you are at least trying to listen to your body. Google, as you can imagine, takes management and leadership very seriously, but that wasn't always true. If you want to hear about the experiment that Google did and what they learned from it about what makes great managers, check out the video that's on screen now. All right, thanks for watching this video all the way through to the end. If you've got this far, please consider subscribing to my channel so you don't miss my future videos. Bye. See you soon.